Kind of on a different note, I really enjoyed your Twitter tirade regarding Joe Rogan's comments this last week. And my question is, what do you think is the best way to draw a line between cancel culture and holding people accountable for what they say?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question because cancel culture is over-defined and over-prescribed in that no one can do and say whatever they want and sort of get away with it. For example, I couldn't walk in naked to a workplace and expect to still be employed. I couldn't then say, oh, it's cancel culture, right? There's lines of acceptability for everything. I think that's a problem with the discussion around cancel culture, is that it's been diluted to the point cancel culture is just sometimes someone being fired for what we like or dislike, and sometimes it is being forced out. I think the key thing is just defining what our Overton window is. I think in terms of holding people accountable, I would say that I'm not calling for Joe Rogan to lose sponsorship. I'm not calling for people to stop listening to him. I'm not calling for Spotify to kick him off the platform. I'm not calling for any of this. The issue I have is when people oscillate between being a comedian and making jokes about Jews, which I have no problem with. I make Jewish jokes all the time. Like, some of them are funny, right? Comedy is comedy. You can make jokes about everyone. That's the whole point of comedy. I have a problem when people oscillate between comedy and commentary, and they use both sides as an excuse. When I'm not funny, I'm a commentator. When I say something that's overtly not true, I'm just joking. He was having a political discussion with two commentators about Ilhan Omar, who's one of the most forward and open anti-Semites in the country, hugely influential on the left, and a driver of a very dangerous form of anti-Semitism in contemporary so-called anti-Israel anti-Semitism. It is not acceptable to be making Jewish jokes in that context. There was another video of him speaking to, I believe, another comedian in April and kind of making some jokes about Jews. They were talking about how they're disproportionately successful, which is true. And I think Joe Rogan made like a puppeteering joke about CNN. That's, you can like it or dislike it. That's not a problem to me because it was two comedians just talking about a topic and making fun of it because he was in a comedian space. You have to decide which side you're working on for me to then be able to say how I think you should be judged. So if I'm judging Joe Rogan as a commentator, I think his statements were, I don't really care about being offensive. I'm not offended by it. I'm concerned about tens of millions of people who listen, many of whom are vulnerable young men who are driven by what he says, taking that under their wing and then that having violent outcomes, which we are seeing all over America today. There is a reason Jews in New York City are being punched in the face roundly, is because people think they're rich and greedy and they're responsible for their ills in life. And so when people say things that mirror that ideology, it's not acceptable to just go say, oh, he was joking, and just move on. But if it's comedians saying things, I don't care as much. I wish they perhaps made more ironic statements which fought anti-Semitism at the same time, but it's not for me to say what they should say as a comedian. So that's really where I draw the line. I hate cancel culture. I would rather people not be pushed from a platform. I would rather them stay and us have an actual discussion over why it mattered what they said. But that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of people defending Joe Rogan who just don't care or want to move on or want to maintain a relationship with Joe Rogan for their own financial gain, for example. That's a bigger problem for me than really defining cancel culture. I think this has nothing to do with cancel culture.